Number 12 is the Vikings. And when we talk about splashy moves, or when you shore up position groups of need, usually you get higher grades. So they're 12th here. Maybe it's just because they only had a handful of draft picks. But the way they attacked the offensive and defensive lines this offseason, I thought would give the Vikings a better grade. And I can't imagine most people grading were like, man, you really missed out by not bringing back Sam Darnold. I think they made the expected move there, letting Sam Darnold walk, rolling with J.J. McCarthy, and then taking the extra resources, shoring up the interior of the offensive line and the interior of the defensive line. I think they made all the right moves here. I'm surprised the Vikings aren't actually in the top 8.
I mean, I think definitely the draft, people did not love Minnesota's draft overall. So I think that's gonna harm their grade. I do think the Darnold thing affects their grade. I don't think people are going, well, that was a catastrophe. I do think people would factor that in and say, well, they lost Sam Darnold, who played really well last year. How good a free agency period can it be if you're losing a starting caliber quarterback and we don't know what we're replacing it with in terms of how good JJ McCarthy is going to be. I do agree, though, overall, it was a good offseason. I mean, the Darnold thing, I think, was understandable in any direction, right? Like, you could understand the argument of he played so well for so much of last season. Let's try and work out a deal. Let's get him locked up to some kind of middle-class quarterback contract. You can also understand that the last 2 weeks were so disastrous that you just couldn't re-up him anymore. You had to walk away and use that money and give it to JJ McCarthy and blah, blah, blah. So I think, in my opinion, either way, I'm fine with that decision. It's just it's a tough call they had to make, and they did. Then taking that money and rebuilding the offensive line completely, I think, is smart. Like, that line got wrecked in critical games. It needed to be improved, and they went hard at it. And, made a couple of other little additions as well. Not even little additions, a couple of other major additions in the defensive tackles, and Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. Those could have huge impacts as well. And then, look, their draft is unspectacular, but the most important pick is the top one, with Donovan Jackson, who theoretically completes the overhaul of the offensive line.
Yeah, I say this over and over again. Very rarely will you draft 4 or 5 times like the Vikings and Commanders did, and people are going to love your draft. That's just not going to happen. The teams that draft 11 and 12 times are going to have more players that people like in the draft community, and they're going to like those drafts better. I think the Vikings made a lot of the proper moves this offseason, just like they did the last couple off seasons. I don't think it's funny because Kwesi been positioned as this analytics GM. And if you said, what's the biggest impact he's made? It has been by far with veteran additions, whether it's trades, TJ Hawkinson, whether it's free agency, Van Ginkel, Grenard. By far, it's been veteran additions and not the draft whatsoever, right? They brought in drafted Jordan Addison. What else have they gotten in the draft over the last few years? It's not much. And they've actually given up a lot of draft picks along the way here to get those veterans. So it's just an interesting dynamic. I think whatever models he's applying have worked much better at projecting NFL players to that roster versus the draft. And they haven't drafted a ton in addition to that.
Yeah.
And now I can't wait to see what Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, if he hits again, right? If Kwesi hits again, if the Vikings hit again with those offseason additions, it's a really good roster. Even if 3 out of those 4 players are nice additions for the Vikings here this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, they have not gotten much out of the draft in the last few years. Obviously, JJ McCarthy is a big question mark at this point. We don't know either way. Dallas Turner didn't make an impact year 1 at all. That draft didn't do much. The draft before is the Jordan Addison draft, third rounder, second pick. Mekhi Blackmon looks like a good player, but tore his ACL, so that's another significant question mark as well. And they're obviously Kwesi's first draft, like the top of that was a disaster, right? Lewis Cine, whether or not he'd have been a good player is tough to know because he had that devastating injury very early on, but he didn't. I mean, he was already outperformed at the start of his career, to get to that point. So the early signs weren't good. And Andrew Booth Jr., cornerback, was terrible. So not been a good draft history from Kwesi so far, but he's made up for it with veteran moves and free agents and all the other things.
So the Vikings are at 12. Again, I'm surprised by this. They're the last team with a GPA over 3, by the way, and I thought they'd be higher.
Thanks for watching all the way to the end of our video.
For more great content, click here to subscribe and here to watch another video. We'll see you again soon.